It's 12 o'clock on the hour, and we have folks starting to tune in, and we are welcoming our illustrious speakers back to the Zoom webinar. Welcome, everyone who's tuned in. My name is Ross Pally, General Manager at Venture Lane. We are a hub and support system for early stage B2B tech companies in the greater Boston area. And today we have Erica Van, venture investor at CRV, and Madeline Keulen, vice president at Victress Capital, joining us today. Welcome, Madeline. Welcome, Erica. We'll turn over to you guys in just a moment for some quick backstories. For everyone who's tuned in, topic for today is managing the fundraising process for an early stage founder from initial outreach all the way up until, but not including, the initial partner meeting. So what can you do to manage that process every step of the way to ensure your chances of having that first partner meeting? Madeline, Erica, I think you both might agree. You have better knowledge than I do. Certainly have the inside view. A lot of unexpected things happening in the last few months to understate it. But I think one sort of activity that's defying a lot of folks' expectations is the level of investment activity. Obviously, investments being made into early stage tech companies. But even at sort of like the fund level, shout out to Victress Capital closing Fund 2 recently. Madeline will hear more about that soon. But definitely seeing a good breadth of investment activity the last month or so, and I'm sure that'll continue. So no better time than now to help some founders kind of train and get ready for maybe a fall fundraise that they're probably planning. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Before we really dig in, let's go over to Madeline and then to Erica to hear quick backstories, current roles, and what's sort of the latest at Victress Capital and at CRV. So Madeline, we'll start with you.
Yeah, happy to. So great to be here with you all. So as mentioned, I'm Madeline Keulen. I'm currently a vice president over at Victress Capital, and we're an early stage firm based here in Boston that is focused on consumer investing with gender diverse teams. So as just mentioned, we recently closed our second fund, so I can very much empathize with fundraising during the current climate, albeit from a different lens. But prior to Victress, I spent most of my career in consulting, so advising retail and consumer clients with the likes of Walmart, Sam's Club, grocers like Sprouts, Hanes, Southwest Airlines, really a wide array, but all very much consumer facing, and in areas such as group strategy, M&A, and ops. Prior to that, I worked at some Fortune 500s, Apple and Disney, and very much, as I was explaining, my accent is Australian, my last name is Dutch, and I don't look like any of those, so very much a cultural hodgepodge and that dynamic. But excited to be part of the Boston community and ecosystem. It's one that I really love.
Great. All right. Erica.
Yeah. So Erica Van, I'm an investor at CRV. Expanded name is Charles River Ventures. In terms of the fund, we are multi-stage, but we are early stage focused. We kind of have three separate teams that focus on three separate things. We have an enterprise B2B team, a consumer team, and a biotech and healthcare team. In terms of kind of where we're spread across, investors kind of sit across SF, Palo Alto, Boston, New York, but we invest everywhere. Internationally as well as domestically. In terms of myself, I personally focus on early stage B2B software, and I specifically focus on companies that are on the East Coast. In terms of my background, I am an SF native and an East Coast transplant. Most of my career was spent in finance, tech, and VC. So I worked at JP Morgan for a number of years in a few different roles. I kind of did a rotation program across different banking teams, then did some internal consulting, and then built out one of the strategy teams. In that last role, still at JP Morgan, I worked a lot with tech companies and startups and realized that I wanted to move more into that kind of tech, working with tech companies, that direction. So then I did some investing at Presidio Partners, which is more of like a Series B focused fund, and then after move to CRV, focusing on what I mentioned before.
Awesome. So I assume West Coast has a special place in your heart, but East Coast completely taking your breath away. You'll probably stay forever.
And not just because you're trapped in a pandemic.
Awesome. Okay. Well, welcome, Erica. Welcome, Madeline. For everyone who's tuned in, if you're just joining us, and for all those who are here from the start, if you have questions for Erica or Madeline at any point, if you hover on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can hit that button, type in your questions, and we will raise those with Erica and Madeline and get them answered at any point. Okay, so let's start digging in. Just to kind of set the stage a little bit, Madeline, we'll start with you, and then Erica will go over to you. What are the main tent poles of the process from initial outreach up until partner meeting? I'm sure this can happen one of several ways, depending on how well you know the founder, but for the purposes of this session, let's assume this is a founder you have no prior knowledge of, contact with, or relationship. How does that process typically look at Victress, and then we'll do CRV right after?
Yeah, so briefly, just to go over the steps for us. So I would say it's initial outreach. There's usually a first call, some kind of light diligence, and then it's a partner call. So that's what it looks like in terms of stages. In terms of the exact details, again, maybe if it's not a warm intro, then perhaps they found my email somewhere. It usually is out there. It's Madeline@VictressCapital.com. And if not via email, then I would tend to maybe see something through LinkedIn, or it's in the old world meeting an event. Now perhaps it's a DM via Zoom. But that's essentially what initial outreach looks like. Usually there's some kind of context with a quick summary and a deck at that point. From there, it goes straight to scheduling that first call. So getting to meet and having that initial connection point. That is usually with one person in the team. It's often myself. And then from there, it's just moving into some kind of, I'll call it light diligence. That might be overstating it, but perhaps a few different questions, maybe looking at an operating model. And that's essentially the stage gate before a partner call. We decide essentially who moves on to a partner call as a team within our Monday meetings.
Great. Essentially, the process. Ooh, do we have a call? Okay, might do some audio work as we're going through. So it sounds like essentially three main parts of the process: outreach, discovery call, and a little bit of diligence before a partner meeting or a partner call. Great. Exactly. Erica, similar over at CRV? Any differences there?
Yeah, so it's pretty similar, but I would say that, so I'll go over how it's similar, and I would talk about how different, depending on the stage the company is in, the diligence does differ a little bit. So, so for us, you typically have a first meeting with someone on the team. It can be anyone. If that goes well, then we'll bring in more of the team, which will be kind of like the deal team, into a second meeting, maybe like a couple of days later, or maybe the next week. If all goes there or well with that, we typically kind of know we're going to pursue or not pursue. So we go into diligence. Diligence can take, anywhere from we've done diligence in like a day to maybe like 1 week or 2 weeks. What does diligence entail? It's typically talking to customers, looking at the data, looking at financials, getting references, doing a lot of market research. Sometimes we bring in specialists within our networks to meet with the company. And then after, if that all goes well, then we bring in the company to our investment committee, where they meet most of the partnership. Bringing in these days is obviously Zoom. But typically it's in person. And after that meeting, we typically know if we're issuing a term sheet or not, like an hour or 2 hours later. So after every presentation, we have a discussion. We kind of make the call on whether or not we think this is right for us. I would say the difference in diligence is so for growth investments, it's very heavily financial. So it's far more financial. I mean, it's always a financial. This is we work in venture is finance, right? But the importance of kind of having your financials together, the importance of growth, the importance of revenue is there's far more of a PE-ish type exercise that's done for growth. Because it's obviously the founder is super important, like the market is super important, but you're not doing like a Series C investment in a company that has no revenue. So it's different based on stage.
Yeah, very important distinction. And we'll get more into the details of what does the due diligence, or at least initial due diligence, look like for a company that is earlier stage. And for the purposes of this conversation, we'll keep it to maybe sort of like a Series A and earlier. But if we start all the way back at initial outreach, we already have a quite relevant question from the audience. Has the pandemic changed your openness to cold outreach from founders? If so, how? So we'll answer that question, but also more generally, Madeline and Erica, what would your advice be for early stage founders who are reaching out to VCs that they don't already have a relationship with? And if any examples come to mind of founders who really did a great job of this and moved on to sort of like second phase of this timeline that we're talking about very quickly for that reason, would love to hear what those examples might be. So Madeline, we can start with you and Erica. Erica right after.
So I think in terms of, again, let's perhaps frame it as a cold email. I think it's important to give an understanding of why we would be interested in the firm, meaning you've done some kind of background research on why you are a fit. You're not a Series C enterprise company reaching out to a consumer seed firm, for instance. I think there's a base layer of you know why you're reaching out to me, and I know why I should be reaching back out to you. That should be clear from the information flow and from that selection. And so I think a few things that are helpful in that. I think sharing a little bit of information up front. So perhaps, again, if you don't have a mutual contact, but there are some kind of commonalities, I'm also trying to build that. So maybe there was an accelerator that I've mentored at or been part of that you were a part of, like mention that. Or maybe there's some kind of event that I've been in the past that you've been in the past. Like just trying to still get something that is a commonality can often be helpful in establishing a relationship. I very much think about these things from a relationship versus transactional point of view. And then I think just giving a few high level metrics, like, you know, why you like, how are you doing so well? Like, what are you doing to date? And like, what round are you trying to raise? Just to give me a little bit of perspective again on how we align. Because that's just helpful in terms of that first overview. And then I think lastly, like just being nice. I can't understate how much it's just nice to get friendly emails instead of something that again is a little bit either less detailed or less friendly, or I think everyone knows what I mean without having to state. But I think yeah, but so those are perhaps some high level things. I'm sure Erica has many more to share. And then your second question, or first rather, was on receptibility to these inbounds. I would say I don't know how much it changed. I would certainly say that I'm every evening, instead of being an event, I'm surely on my email more, and so perhaps I'm getting through them a little bit better. But I think I've always had some openness to taking direct emails, and if it's a fit, it's a fit, regardless if it came from someone that I knew.
Got it. So just to quickly recap, it sounds like do your homework, make sure there's stage and vertical fit between you and the investor. Be nice, golden rule. And then 3 was, it was right in the middle there. Find a commonality, whether it was an event, an accelerator program, something to make the outreach a bit less on the cold side. Erica, any details you would add?
Yeah, so I mean, I would echo it's funny like how there's no secrets in venture, right? So the 3 ways that typically I'll get in touch with a company is, you know, warm intro, cold email, or you bump into them at a conference and you kind of meet them. Or I'm just reaching out because I think the space is interesting, or I think the founder is interesting. Yep. I'll talk about when it comes from the founder to kind of the VC as opposed to the other way around, because I feel like that's probably more relevant. If you can get a warm intro from your seed investor or someone who knows us or knows me, that is so powerful. Like I can't and it's so annoying to do that for the founder, I'm sure, because it takes extra work. You need to send an additional email, but a warm intro from someone that I trust is so powerful. Like it takes extra time from the founder's perspective, but it makes a huge difference. So if you can get it in your seed, like, so for us being like mainly like Series A onwards, like if your seed fund can really recommend, like to send you a recommendation, a seed fund that I've partnered closely with, or I've done deals from, previously, or even that I just know socially, that is very powerful. What Madeline was saying about events, right? What's great is if you meet someone at an event and they come up to you and you exchange cards, you have a conversation, you're vibing, you're interested, you're having good conversation. And then the follow-up email after that, that's a super powerful way to kind of get a meeting as well. I enjoy kind of those interactions. And of course I'll follow up with someone because if they're at an event that I'm interested in, that means that they're doing the work, they're in the ecosystem, they're plugged in, they're networked, like they're in the right community, and they're excited about growing their network for their business and kind of growing their community around the company as well. If it is a cold email, you need to, like, the practice that I with companies that I work with or that I talk about with different companies is the amount of effort that you put into that cold email is going to impact the likeliness that, you'll get a response back. Similar to what Madeline had said, which is super important, is, you could be the best. So for example, since I focus on enterprise software, you could be the best biotech and healthcare company, most pedigreed team, hit all the milestones, have the right labs that you're out of. And you send me kind of a pitch because you didn't look at the website and you didn't see that there's a separate team that looks at that stuff. Yeah. I won't know. So like, I just won't know. And you could be the best. And it's just such a waste because I wouldn't be able to, like, versus if you sent it to the right team immediately, oh my God, like, let's take a meeting. Like, I'm flying to see you, like, in person. So picking the right person in an organization, I can't emphasize how important that is. And it's not because it's not because we'll ignore, because I'll forward kind of emails if there's something in there that resonates with me to the appropriate team. But it's just, it would be my miss just because I do not have a strong kind of background in bio. So like, I wouldn't be able to recognize that this is an incredible company. Just it's very important to reach out to the right person. That's something I can't emphasize enough. Yeah, similar to Madeline, like custom the email. Like if you have a shared network, like throw that out there. If you want to join a shared event, throw that out there. Anything that makes it seem like you're closer to the person. Like I even saying, I've had people say, hey, I saw you speak at this event. That's enough, right?
Got it.
So establish some connection in this virtual world that we're in today.
So very important, this virtual world. So it sounds like first and foremost, get the warm intro if you can. Yes, it takes more time, but your yield rates on that outreach is probably going up enough to make it worth the time. And then second, for some of the larger firms like a CRV, where there are different vertical focuses or technology focuses, make sure that your outreach is targeted towards the right group or the right people. Madeline, it looked like you had something to add.
Yeah, I think one point just to add on warm intros, I don't want to make it seem as though you need to know a current investor. I think founder networks are actually really strong as well. Like look up who is in our portfolio and get an intro through one of our portfolio founders or through another founder that I know. Founder connections are actually really great because the founders we've invested in likely know exactly where we invest and what we're like as a team and who you should reach out to. So I would definitely underscore it doesn't need to be from an investor that we invest alongside or that we know. Certainly use your founder network too.
Okay, very good. So we have another question from the audience, from Barbara. I'm the co-founder of CapW, an advisory firm in Boston that invests and raises capital for women and minority-led, tech-enabled, early-stage companies. We've noticed that sources of capital, family offices, and VCs have been far more open and welcoming to our companies since COVID and Black Lives Matter movements have gotten underway. For you, Madeline, and for Erica, do you expect that sort of like openness or newfound openness to continue? That's the question from Barbara. And Barbara, if I'm missing anything for that question, feel free to type it in. But Madeline, Erica, thoughts there? and we can take a beat, think about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm happy to start. I think I might be biased in the opposite way. Our fund has a lens towards investing in diverse teams, and specifically gender diverse teams. But I think so I'll say two things. One, I think things are changing for the long term and changing for good. And so I do think that capital sources are making some pretty hard shifts that are actually going to take a long time. It's not easy to diversify an investing team. It's not easy to diversify your sourcing pipeline. And so I think actually these things will take time, meaning actually the change will happen over a longer breadth. The other part of that though is I also believe in striking while the iron is hot. And so if you know that something is top of mind in the industry right now, then use that as the time to reach out as well. So I think both of those are true.
Great.
Yeah, and to echo what Madeline has said, we at CRV have always had diversity. We've always valued diversity, and we have, we've worked very hard to try and make our portfolio diverse. But of course, we have a ways to go, and I think it's amazing the word isn't transparency, but the excitement around kind of minority and diverse and having female led companies. And I think similar to what Madeline said, it's like strike while the iron is hot. Like I think it's certainly top of mind now, and there's a lot of resources and effort and excitement around the movement. And you don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we're only hoping that this will continue. I feel like there was certainly a lot of awareness made for women in venture or female founders, and then All Race started as well. So when there's awareness of a problem, and this is a serious problem in venture and in tech, then you need to implement things to bring it to light and to action, correcting all of this, and then hopefully it'll stick and carry on, long term. But it will take effort and it will take time. But I think this is certainly something that people need to fix and are aware of. And I believe it will stick.
Of course. And we've seen some of the positive reactions on our side too. So Venture Lane is doing sort of like these weekly labs. We get a mentor committee together, a few of our companies at Venture Lane, and work on things like lead generation strategy, pricing strategy. And we've had multiple mentors come back and say, provided that my time can be spent mentoring companies where the founder team is underrepresented in one of several areas, then count me in. So we've been able to go back, show our good diversity numbers at the founder level at Venture Lane, but seeing similar things across the board that you both are seeing, and I'm sure a lot of you tuned in are seeing as well. Okay, so let's keep moving just in the interest of time. We had a couple more questions coming from the audience. Chris, Alexi, we'll get to these questions towards the end if we can, but just want to hit on the second two phases of this pre-partner meeting process with Madeline and with Erica. So Madeline and Erica, next phase, sort of that initial call, discovery call. How are you usually kind of structuring and conducting these calls? And then advice for early stage founders who might be getting on exactly these types of calls in the near future. Madeline, we can start with you again.
Yeah, so I actually lead a lot of the structuring to the founder. I think it's best to be a little bit more organic. And so often the way that these calls start is an introduction. Always happy to introduce myself and our firm, but mostly want to get to know them. So love when they start with more of their background, why they started the company that they started, and who their team is, a little bit more of the storytelling and sharing in that dynamic. I usually already have their deck, and so I've either looked at it before, or I can kind of flick through as they're speaking. They certainly don't need to walk through page by page, but just generally going over where did they start, what's that story, what got them to where they are now, and where are they going in the future. And then from there, it's more of a back and forth in terms of questions. And I like it to be more of a dialogue than a quote unquote one-way pitch.
So it sounds like the key words there are narrative, storytelling. It sounds like your advice for an early stage founder might be tell the story. And if it is a good story, it will be compelling. Something along those lines.
Yeah, I'd say tell the story and have a conversation.
Yeah, got it. Great. Erica, similar over at CRV. You leave it a little less structured and kind of let founders tell the story and fill in the blanks?
Yeah, so typically, sometimes I'll have the deck and some beforehand, and sometimes I won't. But typical, similar to Madeline, I love hearing the founder story first, and then just going through the deck, and having kind of good conversation about the market, about the product, about their customers. I would say that in general, I'll say for CRV, team is one of the most important things for us. We will take kind of like an incredible team that is pre-revenue, pre-traction, pre-anything, like nothing, if it's an incredible team. So we very much value teams. So for me, a lot of the conversation, especially if it's an early stage company, and I mean, with me, we talk about the team, we talk about the story. Now, I think it's important for founders to do their research on the fund and like look at the website and kind of read the Medium posts and figure out what actually is valuable to the firm. Because there are some firms that I know that I'm friends with, that I do deals with and whatnot. Team is important, but maybe traction is very important. So like maybe there's some early stage funds that like won't do pre-product, right? Won't do pre-traction. If that, if you see that, then it's important. Or if you find out that a firm really does need to see some traction for it to get going, you should emphasize that in the conversation. So every pitch that you do should be very curated to the fund. It's like a resume. Every time you send out a resume, you highlight things that are important to the company that, you're working with, and you read their ethos, you read the things that they value, and you cater to that. Like every pitch, try and figure out what the fund really shares, like loves to like talk about. And for us, it's like the founder story, founder market fit. So for us, I spend a lot of time on that. But I think that is a good way to lift up and highlight, if you can highlight them, things that are important to the fund, and that makes the conversation go better. Like I have conversations where the company may be doing really well, and then they start, hey, these are our metrics, these are our traction, like look at our revenue, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. Yeah. But for us, actually, the most important thing is the team. So let's start with the team. So I think it's certainly a balance, but I think it's very important to customize like how you spend the time based on how the fund kind of communicates their values.
Sounds good. So talk about the team, and then understand sort of the headspace of the investors that you're talking to. Where do they spend all their days and hours thinking, in what investment theses and what areas, markets, and make sure that you're talking about the things that get them going and they get excited to talk about. Mm-hmm. Great. So, Erica, you also mentioned sort of there are other funds out there that CRV has relationships. So I'm just seeing a question come in from the audience from Chris. Your funds invest in different stages, and I think this might be a more CRV specific question, but Madeline, maybe you have some thoughts as well. Do you have relationships that you would recommend to earlier stage companies, seed stage, that you work with on a regular basis? I don't know if Chris is looking for particular funds, and Chris, feel
like seed firms that I like. Is that kind of the question? Like Victress that I love. We have a company together. We have Harper Wild together, consumer team.
Yeah. But Chris, if you're out there, if you just want to quickly send in kind of like a second question, just clarifying, but maybe one or two out there, particularly in the Boston area, that CRV has good relationships with, or probably more importantly, how do you work together with funds at an earlier stage than CRV might be?
So I'll start with the second question. How do I work with seed firms in general? So I mean, going to events, spending time, spending a couple hours with companies in their portfolio. I know lots of seed firms have kind of office hours for kind of Series A onward firms. I do a lot of those where that you come in and kind of look at companies that are, either at the halfway mark, in terms of raise, like in terms of like they're, a couple months away from fundraising, and they want to talk to kind of, we're still early, but like not just seed. So bringing them in, I do a lot of that. I go to events. I sit on different panels. yeah, no, and then in terms of seed funds, there's incredible seed firms in Boston, Victress being one. We've done a lot of stuff with Founder Collective. We've done a lot of stuff with First Round Capital. Next View is great. Hyperplane is great. I'm trying to make sure that I cover everyone because I know I feel like there's a lot of seed firms. There's a bunch, but yeah, those are some that we do. Oh, Slow Ventures is incredible.
And for Chris and for everyone who's tuned in, the Capital Network organization in the Boston area that helps early stage founders fundraise and educates around the fundraising process. They have a great dashboard on their website that shows every VC in Boston organized by focus and stage. So that can be a great resource to check out as well.
Venture Lane.
Venture. This is
I looked at a ton of your companies.
For now.
I think like the other thing to note on that is like ask questions during that first call as well. It doesn't need to be just you talking. Like feel free to ask the firm what they're interested in. If it doesn't seem as though they're right stage aligned, then say, I really love getting to know you. It seems as though we're a bit early. Are there other funds? And like ask that question on the call and make that a deliverable a next step. Because I think it's much easier once you're on the call just to have that conversation. Because again, to Erica's point, maybe you don't have the deck in advance. Maybe again, neither of you really knows that you're just not really aligned in terms of stage. But if it's a great company, it's a great company and you'll want to stay in touch. And I think as VCs, we mostly do want to be helpful. And so I'd love to find a friend at a different firm, a company that's exactly right for them. So I think it's a win-win.
Yep. Good point. Okay, so we have another question from the audience about the initial outreach, and then we will shift gears over to our third stage of doing that initial due diligence. So from Carlos, we have, when evaluating the quality of a warm intro from, say, a founder in your portfolio, how much diligence do you do into asking that founder what they think of the founder or company that they are referring? Is it really a warm intro if the two founders never met each other in person and had, for instance, a brief video call? So do you have a little bit of back and forth with that referring founder ever saying, how well do you know them? What's your take on their concept? Or if you see that it's a referral from a portfolio founder of yours, send them through and we'll take it from there.
Typically for me, if it's a CRV portfolio company and they're in our family, I'll take it. Like, yeah. I don't question it. That might be a waste. Sometimes, that might be bad. Sometimes, it's usually good, but I typically don't question. That's why warm intros are so powerful, right? Like, I think, if you trust the person that's sending it over, maybe I'm like too trustworthy, but I'll usually take it.
Well, it's coming from a trusted source.
Yeah. If it's a CRV portfolio company, I'll take it.
I agree. I think there's also something to be said around, like, if you take a step back from that, if a founder reaches out to me and they say, I've actually never met this person, but they reached out to me on LinkedIn seeing that I've connected to you, no sweat off my back, but if you really want to talk to them, just offering it, that's like very different than I know this person, I believe in them. So I think that's more of the context as well. And like, is it a strong warm intro? Like, what are they actually saying about you? And like, ask people who will give you a good warm intro.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's get into our sort of third and final stage of this pre-partner meeting process. So we're talking about this initial layer of due diligence that's being done on these prospective investments. So Madeline, we'll start with you. What are kind of like the big check boxes of this initial due diligence phase?
Yeah, so, and again, this is in the context of we are investing fairly early. We're predominantly seed stage. And so Erica can probably give a little bit more context on what it looks like elsewhere. But for us, it's fairly simple. I think one, it starts with the deck. And so there are a lot of things that are often covered in the deck, which means that I don't need to ask the question, like, do you have some loose financial projections? Again, we know that you're not actually going to, on the mark, reach every stone for the next 5 years that you've laid out, but we want an idea of what type of scale and growth you're looking to achieve and what type of framework and what type of time frame and where that's really coming from. Like for us as consumer investors, maybe you're a consumer brand. Like, are you trying to be wholesale? Are you trying to be retail? You know, maybe you're a service. Are you trying to go B2C? Are you trying to go B2B2C? What does that build look like? Do you switch your business model at some stage? We're really trying to understand the drivers of where that's going through. So both showing the actual like metrics and what metrics are important to you and why, and then showing that in the respect of where you plan to go and what that larger vision is. It's very much just putting together, again, right now we're here, this is how far we've come, this is where we want to go, and this is our vision and strategic direction for getting there. And so, you know, some of those might be financial, some of those might be the build of the team and what that looks like. Some of that might be, what are these fund proceeds for? And some of it might be, again, just a very basic operating model so that I can see what the drivers of the business are. But I think those are a few of the key things that I'd look at in a fairly early stage.
Rick's sense of scale, plan, and vision for getting there. If that's an accurate recap. Erica, any check boxes to add to that due diligence list? And keeping in mind it's probably pre-Series A and earlier.
Yeah. So for seed for us, I would say it's 75% founding team, which is kind of weird, but it's very much that's literally the only thing that we hear about for seeds. So what does that mean? Or sorry, not the only thing that we care about, but one of the most important things. What does that mean? Does the founding team have founder market fit? You know, have they worked in the industry that they're building product in? Have they built product before? Can you really connect the dots as to why they want to build this business for the next, 6, 8, 10 years? Yep. The founder story. Those are the things, or can they hire good technical talent if the founding team is not technical? Like, those are the things that we look for. Like, and then have they built businesses before? Have they built product before? It's very, very team focused. I would say the remaining like 25% out of that 75% is the market, not too competitive yet. Does the idea sound like a little bit weird? So not so obvious at the seed. Like, I think at the seed, it can't be so obvious that people need a solution like that, at least for us. It needs to sound like I'm not sure if this will work, but like maybe it will work. Because if it's too obvious, then it's too late for us to make a seed investment. Mm-hmm. Like, it needs to kind of be in that category for us where we think like, okay, this market is starting to happen. It's not too late, but it's like we're starting to see indication that this could be a big market, and we're getting excited about it. That's why. And maybe a little bit of product that's built. It doesn't need to be fully built out, but a lot of our seeds tend to be they have some product in place. Doesn't necessarily need to have been launched yet, but to have some product. At the Series A, I would say team is equally important, but we also do look at kind of traction revenue as well. So it's a balance of team, product, market, and kind of traction and revenue, right? So solid team with the same kind of check boxes as the seed. I would say that the market is like, you see it, that it is a market and it is growing. So it's not just like a market that isn't growing, it's not growing faster than GDP. It needs to be like a growing market. Product needs to typically be built, not fully built, but built, and maybe you can reference a few customers. And revenue, you need to be seeing some revenue growth. What we typically see is like 10 to 15% month-over-month growth. Sometimes if they're huge kind of, enterprise contracts, it doesn't need to be like that, but that's what we typically see in terms of company growth. And the ability for the founding team to hire well and sell well too. Those are kind of things that we look for, but it's a balance of product, market, team, and kind of traction for us at the A.
All important. So those are some of the important considerations being made on the investor side. In terms of managing the process itself, for you, Erica, and for you, Madeline, anything that you see founders do that helps that process go smoothly, faster? Are there certain types of documentation that you're asking for founders every time? So maybe these are things that they can have on hand and have ready when you do ask for them. Anything that founders do to make that process run quickly and efficiently?
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to tell a story about a company that did everything right. I don't know how they did it. I think
45. So yes, please, story. abbreviated version. If it's possible.
Say that one more time. You broke out. You said we're talking about that at 12:45.
No, you're telling the story that you've got a little time.
Oh, okay. Hey, no, I'll tell the story. So this company did everything right. I think they had really strong kind of initial angels and kind of, this was for a Series A. So they were going out for their Series A. I think they just had a really good support system that helped them kind of check all the boxes and just like have an all-star approach to fundraising. So intro to the company came through a seed fund that I was very close to. So that was warm intro. Check the box. I took the meeting and you could tell that the founder was focused on fundraising. So I think some people have like a philosophy where it's like, okay, I'll kind of fundraise and run my business, fundraise on the side. I think I encourage, our founders, if you're fundraising, you commit to it. You're not willy-nilly, like get your stuff together, like fundraise, have everything ready. Because if you're not prioritizing it, many times it might not go well. When I took my first meeting with the company, they did their research, they looked at the firm, they saw what we valued. Team. First slide, team. Team. All they did was talk about the team and how they had found a market fit. They worked in the industry for a long time. Played into kind of our ethos and what gets us excited. They then immediately opened up the data room, best data room I've ever seen in my entire life. And had everything that I could ask for, cohort analysis, revenue ramp. They even had a full economic analysis of how COVID was affecting their business, how it affected like comps in the industry. Any question we could ask, they were clear. Typically, VCs know if you're being gray about something. If you're hiding something and not being upfront about it, it's probably not good. So we'll dig into it. We spent a lot of time in diligence. So they had everything. Customer references, we asked them, they gave it to us in 24 hours. I think it's not a good signal if you ask for customer references and they wait a week. I think that when founders give a long time to give the customer references, you may have incredible customers, but it might seem like, you don't have like a good referenceable customer base. Many times it's not true, right? You probably wouldn't be fundraising if your customers hated the product. So quickly giving customer references, have your customers prepped. So have those conversations with your customers ahead of time being like, hey, VCs might reach out to you. Is it okay if I send you an email and you'll respond? I think that's very important.
Yep.
And they were also very good about preparing their community for reference checks. So, we'll do calls with customers that, a company will have, but we'll also do calls with people in their community. So for example, this company, my best friend is the CFO of a company that was the second user of this product. Of course, I'm going to ask them their opinion on this product. But preparing that, like making sure that your community of people that would obviously be referencing you, like was strong. And then in the end, brought them into the partnership, did a really good job kind of communicating, good eye contact. They had rehearsed. They got 6 term sheets in 5 days. So.
What better evidence than a well-managed fundraising process?
Yeah, so they did a great job. Best practices. Of course, no one can be that great. Or sorry, I take that back. You can be that great. Just be aware of the things that you need to do to like do that. And it's not. It doesn't sound crazy what they did, right? But it's amazing how many people don't actually do that.
So it sounds like two great nuggets there. One, have your data room together, organized with all the documentation that you can anticipate the investor requesting. And 2, customer reference checks, have them ready to go, be able to turn those around quickly because that turnaround time can communicate certain things about what the relationship might be between you and your customers. Mm-hmm. Madeline, anything quickly to add in the next 60 seconds about data room, customer reference checks, or anything else?
No, I think I'd echo what Erica said. I think, especially in this current context, make sure that those references are actually quick and strong because it isn't a time where we can actually meet you in person. And so we're really counting on people that know you well to tell us more about you and to share their conviction and really why we should be backing you as well. So I would echo the importance of that actually more than ever on both the customer, your advisor, prior investors, whoever can give that strong check for you.
Yeah, very important. Okay, with that, we're coming up on 12:45. Alexei, Dan, Ahmad, the 3 of you submitted questions. Apologies that we couldn't get to them in time. Erica and Madeline, what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you if they want to sort of follow up with some of these questions?
My email is erica@crv.com. please put in the email that you attended this session so I can reference how you're getting in touch with me. Because again, being, showing up to events that, we both were at, that we valued, I think that makes a difference in terms of getting in touch with people.
Great. So
likewise.
Madeline.
Yeah, Madeline at victresscapital.com. Likewise to Erica, make a reference to this. I will say I'm reasonably on LinkedIn. For a VC, I'm terrible on Twitter. But certainly I'm always answering my emails.
All right. Well, with that, before it turns to 12:46, thank you both so much for making time today. A lot of really, really good tactical advice for founders who are no doubt getting ready, if they're not fundraising already, getting ready for a fall raise. So thank you both for your time. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and hope to see you all on another webinar coming up soon. Thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks guys.
See ya.